It was an ordinary evening when I first met our new neighbor, Mr. Reynolds. He had moved into the house next door, and my wife and I decided to show our hospitality and invite him over for dinner. We really wanted to make a good impression and get to know the man who would be living next door to us. Mr. Reynolds arrived quickly, and upon entering our home, he smiled warmly at us. This smile seemed rehearsed, as if he was hiding something. Throughout dinner, he was polite and engaged in conversation, but there was a strange emptiness in his eyes. They seemed bottomless, as if he was always distracted by something incomprehensible. Gradually, things became even stranger. Mr. Reynolds began asking personal and intrusive questions, inquiring into the details of our lives. We tried to turn the conversation to other topics, but he persisted in his interest in our personal lives. My wife and I exchanged anxious glances, feeling increasingly uncomfortable in his presence. When dinner was over, we politely asked Mr. Reynolds to leave, and only then did he leave our home. Before he left, however, he handed us a strange gift, an indoor plant. The gesture was unsettling, and I couldn't escape the feeling that he had put an implicit threat in that gift. In the days that followed, I constantly felt that Mr. Reynolds was watching us. I saw him outside my house, just standing there watching our dwelling. It gave me goosebumps running down my spine, and I became increasingly paranoid about our new neighbor. One night I was awakened by a knock on our bedroom window. Cautiously approaching the window, I saw Mr. Reynolds, his face pressed against the glass and his eyes staring intently at me. Trying to get him to leave, I yelled, but he wouldn't leave. He just kept staring, his breath fogging the window. This sinister act is vicious to me, for I felt violated in my own home. The next day, I decided to deal with Mr. Reynolds' behavior and knocked on his door. When he opened, I clearly told him that his actions were unacceptable and he should respect our personal space. However, his response was completely unexpected. Instead of apologizing or acknowledging his intrusiveness, he simply smiled his disturbing smile, stating that he wanted to be a good neighbor and get to know us better. I walked away from his door, feeling even more anxious than before. It was obvious that Mr. Reynolds was hiding something, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Weeks went by, and his behavior became more and more erratic. He would leave strange notes on our doorstep, with mysterious messages and drawings that made no sense. He seemed to be trying to convey some message to us, but I couldn't figure it out. One night we heard strange sounds coming from his house, whispering and mumbling as if people were gathered in it. It was well past midnight, and we realized that something was wrong. We called the police, and when they arrived, we found a room filled with pictures of our family, taken without our consent. Mr. Reynolds was taken into custody, and it was discovered that he had a previous history of stalking and harassment. We narrowly escaped the nightmare, and I couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if action hadn't been taken. To this day, I am still haunted by the memory of our chilling encounter with our new neighbor. It was an eerie reminder that danger can lurk very close, hidden behind a facade of politeness and ordinariness. Living in Dark Hollow, just a stone's throw from Pittsburgh, was controversial. The place was gorgeous, surrounded by expansive greenery and charming old houses. But heck, having neighbors in the form of the Wards was like living next to horror actors. They were the kind of people who could turn any ordinary day into an episode of The Twilight Zone. At the head of this family was Winston Ward, or Win, as he preferred to call himself. My interactions with Win were mostly during my teenage years. As a young girl, I received special attention from him, which I wasn't happy with. He was overly polite, but in a way that sent shivers down my spine. He seemed to be fake nice, always with some hidden agenda. There were times when I noticed his predatory glances on me, piercing and unadulterated. For example, one day when we happened to be in the same store, he followed me around, coming so close that it made me feel uncomfortable. He even sniffed the air next to me, which was very strange. I remember walking through the store trying to get rid of the unsettling feeling, but in the corner of my eyes I kept feeling his presence. Every time I turned a corner, I tried to get rid of it. But then, after a while, I walked out of the candy department, immersed in thinking about which candy to choose. I forgot about the time for a moment, but as I turned right at the end of the aisle, I almost shrieked in surprise. He was standing next to me, literally a couple feet away, and I was a little shorter than he was, so he seemed to be looking down on me with an unsettling smile on his face. He held his hand behind his back, and I noticed it move slightly. Then he spoke up. "Is this the sweetness you seek?" I was shocked, frozen in place as if rendered speechless. However, I remained polite, not wanting to cause a scene in the grocery store. I mumbled, "Thank you," and hurried away. I ran out of the store as fast as I could, not even daring to look back to see if he was following me. I was left with the feeling that I had just escaped the terrible danger that lurked in the shadows. Ward was strangely courteous to women and girls, but to guys he constituted a nightmare vision. My confrontation with my brother turned into a dangerous situation when his car was smashed with a baseball bat. Wynn was completely serious. Then a night happened that I still remember with trepidation. I was lying in my room trying to sleep when I heard strange noises outside my window. The shrill scratching was replaced by quiet tapping. At first I thought it was just a tree branch or something, but the sound was too rhythmic, too mysterious. I winced as I lay there listening to this horrible sound that grew more and more intense. Gathering my wits, I peered through the blinds, and what I saw pierced me to the marrow of my bones. A dark figure stood in the courtyard, moving as if seeking entrance. The moonlight was insufficient to discern who it was, but its shape it was too enormous to be an animal. My heart was pounding frantically, and I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to wail, calling my parents for help, but fear paralyzed me. The figure stood there for what seemed like an eternity, and then it just disappeared. The next morning I looked around the street, partially expecting to see footprints or something similar, but there was nothing. It seemed as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, that I was vulnerable in my own room. It was one of those moments that stayed with me, making me doubt every creak of the night house. And I certainly knew it was someone from the neighboring family. And that didn't strengthen my peace of mind. Then there was Maggie, Wynn's wife. She always wore lots of makeup and had dainty eyebrows. One day I stopped by to give them the mail that had been delivered to us by mistake, and she told me the scary origin story of the song, "Ring Around the Rosie." She seemed to enjoy scaring me. Their youngest son, Jacob, was very into Native American culture, but not in a good way. He ran around with a bow and arrow, and some people even claimed to have seen him with real arrows. Yes, he even scared people by showing up with dead animals. Plus, he even got the attention of social workers. Johnny, the eldest son, the ward, was not quite right. He was the kind of guy who growls at you in the hallways of the school like a wild animal. But the craziest thing he did was something to a girl from our school. She was beautiful and smart. Johnny had somehow unwisely fallen in love with her. He asked her out on a date, but when she turned him down, things went south. In chemistry class, he became sullen and silent while looking at her, to the point where she had to change lab partners. But Johnny didn't settle down. She was driving home from school one night, and in the rearview mirror she saw Johnny sitting in the back seat, grinning madly. He was hiding there, waiting for her. She was so scared that she lost control of the car and got into an accident, lying in the hospital for a week. And Johnny, he only got a slap on the wrist from the police. No serious consequences. It was crazy. When the for sale sign was finally put up on the ward's house, relief seemed to finally pass through Dark Hollow. After they were gone, they became more of an urban legend, a story that old-timers tell to scare their friends. It's nice to think that nothing terrible happened while they were here, but who knows what they're up to now. Wherever they are, it's scary to think about. Every time I walk to the store or down the street, I feel like they are still watching me. Even though nothing happened, that feeling never left me. It seemed like their presence left an indelible mark on the neighborhood. Sometimes I casually glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see their dark figures lurking in the shadows. It's a constant reminder of the anxiety they brought into our lives. a feeling that's hard to shake off. I hope to never have to run into this family again.